All right, everyone. Hello, welcome. We are so excited to have you here today. Thank you all so much for joining us for this very special webinar. We're going to get started in just a minute, but as folks start to join us, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know your name, where you're joining us from, and let us know what your favorite blue space is, blue or green space. Just as a little icebreaker in the chat, we'll get started in just a minute. Okay, once again, thank you all for joining us. Just a little bit of background context. My name is Laura Johnson, and I am the Youth Program Supervisor at the Ocean Project. And this very special webinar marks the kickoff to our brand new Youth Advocacy webinar series, which will highlight youth conservation leaders around the world who are each going to be sharing their own unique perspectives and advocacy experiences. This webinar also serves as a primer for our upcoming youth advocacy training series, which is a virtual 4-week program. But I'm going to share a little bit more about that after the presentation. Again, if you're just joining us, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. And I think with that being said, I'm going to introduce our wonderful guest speaker for today, Dr. Enric Sala. Enric is a National Geographic explorer in residence and founder of Pristine Seas. He's been working for many years to protect our oceans while also educating the public on how to push for strong conservation action. As a longtime friend of the Ocean Project, this is one of several webinars he's presented with us over the last few years. Thank you again for joining us, Enric, and we're very excited to have you here. So I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Laura, and hello, everyone. I cannot see you, but good to see you virtually. So as you all know, in December last year, the world's countries agreed to protect 30% of the land and 30% of the ocean by 2030. That was a huge success, but that was the easy part. The difficult part is to implement the target, to make sure that we get to the 30%. And that's going to be very difficult. But I'd like to spend some time showing you some slides and then have some time for a discussion, for questions and answers. Because first, I'd like to make the case, right, again, of why do we need 30% of the ocean protected. So now we go from the target to action. And the best way to show it is, what happens when you protect an area, when you fully protect an area from fishing, mining, drilling, and other damaging activities. Because some countries are already trying to protect 30% of their waters in protected areas that allow bottom trawling or other types of industrial fishing, which is absolutely meaningless, right? They will count these areas as protected, but actually these areas don't protect anything. So I'd like to show you what happens, and this is better than any data, believe me. This was Cabo Pulmo in Mexico in 1999, 4 years after it had been protected. The place was an underwater desert. The local fishermen in the mid-90s were so upset with not having enough fish to catch that they decided to ask the Mexican government to close off to fishing 70 square kilometers of reef. This is before, this is just after protection. As you can see, there are a few damselfish at the background, but the place is quite empty. We came back 10 years later, and this is what we saw. This is the same place. No, before protection and after protection. We saw the place coming back to pristine, including abundant large predators like these groupers, sharks, and jacks. And this is something that you only can see in areas that are fully protected, meaning no-take areas. So if we want to restore marine life with all the benefits that it provides to humanity, we need to think of no-take areas. But people will say, well, but yeah, you want to close 30% of the ocean, but where are people going to fish? Well, today, only 3% of the ocean is in fully protected areas. So 97% of the ocean is open to fishing. So fishing is not affected by protected areas today, unfortunately. However, fishing has been declining for 30 years. We reached peak fish in 1996. And the abundance of fish in the ocean, the catch of fish in the ocean has been declining since, despite the increased effort. So the worst enemy of fishing and food security is overfishing, not protected areas. Actually, what we have seen all over the world is that when you protect an area fully, when you don't kill the fish, they take a longer time to die. They grow larger. And we know that it's the largest females that produced most of the eggs that replenish the populations, because these large females produce a disproportionately larger number of eggs relative to smaller females. And it doesn't matter how well you manage fisheries, you will never be able to recover those huge abundances and huge sizes that you see in protected areas. So we have seen how these protected areas have been able to replenish the fishing grounds around them. And fishermen are catching more fish and more lobsters and more scallops now around those areas than before, when they were fishing all over the place. But also, there are additional economic benefits, because people go to where the fish are. And this is an example of a scuba diver in Cabo Pulmo. Now those visionary fishermen are making much more money taking divers to dive in these coral reefs and to see these fish, right? They don't have to fish anymore. And they are doing much, much better than most coastal communities in Mexico. So these protected areas not only increase marine life within their boundaries, but also they increase economic revenue, they generate employment, they generate jobs, and also they help to replenish the areas around. So they have benefits that expand beyond their boundaries. Unfortunately, we don't have enough. 8% of the ocean is in marine protected areas, but most of them allow commercial fishing, and only 3% is in fully protected areas. So how much should we protect? We already know 30%, but where does this number come from? And where should it be? Because it would be very easy to protect some of the high seas, the international waters, where nobody's fishing, where there are no threats, areas that are the least productive of the ocean, and have 30% of the ocean protected and achieve zero conservation benefits. So we need to be very conscious about and very strategic about where this protection should be. We cannot just protect the areas where there is no fishing, thus there is no conflict. We need to protect the areas that will give us the biggest benefits, the areas that would increase biodiversity the most and will provide all these benefits to humanity. So to address that, we spent 4 years, a group of 20 plus scientists and economists, we got together, and for 4 years we worked on a study to prioritize these areas, to rank the ocean. Where are the areas that are the top priority? And this is what we found. This is the global map of priorities. The light blue areas are areas that are already fully protected, which is at 3%. The yellow areas are the areas that are on the top 5% priorities. Light green is top 10% priorities, and so on. So the lighter the areas here, the higher the priorities. These are the areas that, if fully protected, would give us the biggest gains in biodiversity. And notice that most of these areas are within the waters of countries, not in the high seas. Right? You hear a lot about the high seas these days. There was the high seas treaty, etc. But the high seas provides only 4% of the global fishing catch, only 4%. It's charismatic species like sharks and tuna. But the real threat, and most of the biodiversity, and most of the priorities are within countries' waters, within the 200-mile exclusive economic zones. This is where 96% of the problem is, where we catch 96% of the fish. So the high seas, yes, there are areas in the high seas that are key to protect. There are the tuna and shark fisheries have to be better managed. But when we're talking about global biodiversity priorities, we're talking about countries' waters. That's very, very important. We did also an exercise of what would be the areas that, if fully protected, would give us the biggest gain in fish because of that spillover effect. So there are areas where the spillover exceeds the foregone catch, which means that there is a net gain of fish to catch. And this is counterintuitive to many, but we have seen this all over the world. And there is no future of fishing, especially in coastal communities, in the developing world, unless there are areas that 30% is fully protected to help replenish the other 70%. So the science and the economics are very clear. So when we look at, okay, how can we maximize both biodiversity and food security? And we did the analysis, and we found that the areas here, the colored areas, are the areas that would protect to maximize fish catch and to maximize biodiversity. And that is 45% of the global ocean. So 30% is a milestone. Is not the ultimate goal, right? But 30% by 2030 is the milestone that we want to achieve. So that's very important. So this is where we should place the areas and how much. So 30% again is the minimum, but we have a lot to do. Now, people will ask, well, but how much this is going to cost? We cannot afford it, right? So there were several analyses, and one showed that around $20 billion per year would be required to manage a network of protected areas covering 30% of the ocean. And you hear, oh, 20 billion, we don't have the money, it's too expensive, we cannot afford it. Well, we do have the money, because 20 billion is the money that governments spend to subsidize the fishing industry every year to overfish. These are $20 billion that go to basically, diesel is almost free for fishing boats. And these are dollars that go to expand the capacity of boats. And we already know there are twice as many boats in the water to catch the same amount of fish. That was a World Bank report that showed that if we cut the number of fishing boats in half, that remaining half would be catching the same amount of fish. So it would reduce the cost by half, it would double the profits, and it would keep the catch at the same level. So there is a huge problem of overcapacity. There are too many boats out there. Yet governments spend, like China, European Union, the United States, and many others, spend a lot of money to subsidize, to perpetuate overfishing. So if we were able to redirect those harmful subsidies to conservation, to finance the transition to 30%, that would benefit the fishermen, especially the coastal artisanal fishermen, right, who are usually at odds with the big industrial fishing boats. And just to give you a comparison of how ridiculously low this number is, it seems like $20 billion is a lot of money. Well, this is 1/4 of what we spend every year on ice cream. So the money is there. We just use it for things that don't protect our life support system. So I'm going to stop here, and I think we should start a discussion.
Excellent, Enric. Thank you so much. I love hearing you speak about 30 by 30, and this entire concept and all of the science behind it is so interesting. I did put in the chat, if anybody has any questions for the Q&A, be sure to submit them through the Q&A feature. I do have a question for you, Enric, just to get everything started. There are obviously different levels at which conservation policy can be implemented at a county, a very local level, state, federal level. So what would you say that the process of moving conservation policy forward looks like for one individual?
Well, you hear something that, oh, I'm just one individual, what can I do? Well, let's look at the other way, right? If I pollute a lot and I use single-use plastic and I have I eat and threatened species of fish, I can say, well, but I'm just one person. My impact is insignificant. Okay, but when you multiply this times 8 billion people on the planet, the impact is huge, right? So let's turn it around. If you do something good, even if it may seem insignificant, if you multiply this times 8 billion, it would be a huge positive impact, right? So think about this when you think about what power your actions can have. And it always takes one person to start the movement. Look at Greta Thunberg. and what she started on climate protest, right? You can do the same thing. All of your countries, all of them agreed to the nature deal in Montreal at the COP15 of the Convention on Biodiversity last December. So your countries have agreed to protect 30% of the global ocean. So you should start a campaign in your country to start with, asking for signatures and getting stories in the media. Same thing like Greta did for climate, but demanding that your country implements the target, demanding that your country protects vital places on your coastline, and making sure that they understand that this argument that, oh, we cannot protect more because we have to catch more fish to feed more people is a myth. It's a lie. It's a fallacy. Actually, if you want to catch more fish, you have to protect that at least that 30% to help you replenish the rest. Otherwise, the fish catches are going to continue going down. And it is up to the government, and it's the responsibility to dedicate public money for this, because they are subsidizing bad practices. They are subsidizing overfishing. So demand that they use these subsidies, that they shift these subsidies to actually fund conservation, to transition to a place, to a scheme where actually there is more fish in the ocean for everybody. So you can start that campaign in your country to hold your government accountable.
Yes, I 100% agree with your answer, but I also have a follow-up question. Again, please, if you do have any questions, share them in the chat or the Q&A feature. But my follow-up question to you, Enric, about starting those campaigns or finding those campaigns that are already existing in your community. Do you have any tips for connecting with the decision makers at these various levels of government? Like, how are you able to find the right decision makers to contact?
Well, it depends on the country, but we're talking with young, smart people who are better at internet than I am, right? So if I can find who is the person who makes the decision about protected areas in my country, all of you can. You only have to go online and search for it. Usually there is this conflict in governments between the Ministry of the Environment and the Ministry of Fisheries, right? Because of the issues, the perceived cost of protection that I mentioned before. So I would start by contacting the Ministry of Environment. And you may think that the Minister of Environment will not want to talk to you. But if you gather enough signatures, and there are all these online platforms to gather signatures, and people have been very good at gathering tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of signatures for good causes. If you have that public support, then they will listen, because remember that the first law of politics is to be re-elected. That's what 99% of the politicians care about, right? They care about votes. So if there is something that can affect their constituencies, their votes, they will pay attention to that, right? So go online, look at how to contact your Minister of the Environment, gather write a letter, gather that support, and send it. And at the same time, send it to media, to your national media, and so that they can publish this open letter to the Minister of the Environment, demanding that the country fulfills its commitment to protect 30% of the ocean.
Yes, there are so many different resources available online that you can go and find to contact your elected officials, no matter what country you live in. Those resources are out there. Again, I want to give you guys a chance to submit a question if you have any. But Enric, I was just wondering if you could speak a little more to the role that youth specifically play in all of this. I met you in person for the first time when I was 17. You might not remember that, but I remember what you told me that day. And you told me that it doesn't matter how young you are still able to make a difference as long as you're using your voice. So if you could speak a little bit more to the role that youth play, that would be.
Yeah. So I used to be a professor of marine biology at the University of California in San Diego. in my previous life. I was doing research on the impacts of humans in the ocean, mostly fishing and global warming. And I was writing scientific papers about this, describing how we were overfishing, how ocean warming was destroying ocean life all around the world. And one day I realized that all I was doing was writing the obituary of the ocean. And I thought, wow, I don't want to spend 20 more years as a professor, look back and think that, wow, all I have done is just rewrite the obituary with more and more data, just describing how we have destroyed ocean life. So I decided to quit my job, and I came to the National Geographic Society, and I proposed a project, the Pristine Seas project, to go out and explore some of the wildest places in the ocean, conduct scientific research to measure how healthy these places are and why they are special and we need to protect them. Economic analysis to show that protecting them has benefits that outweigh the costs. And also identify who are the decision makers, who are the people, or who is the person who's going to make the final decision, who's going to support it and who's going to oppose it, and how we have to deal with every one of these groups, and who are the local leaders, the local trusted messengers for each one of these groups who can help us. And finally, we also produce documentaries that have, we have the research data for the brain, but first we go to the heart. We produce these documentaries for every one of the places we go to, and we show how beautiful this place is. And we show that this place belongs to your country, unbeknownst to you. Look at what you have. But this place is threatened by bottom trawling or industrial fishing or whatever, or salmon farms or whatever. And therefore, you have an opportunity to do something historic here, right? And so far, we have been able to work with governments, local communities, and indigenous peoples to create 26 of the largest marine reserves in the world, covering an area that is very large. On aggregate, is over twice the size of India, or 2/3 of the size of the US. And now for the rest of the decade, we're going to be working with more governments to help them implement 30 by 30, supporting them with our research, our media, and our economic analysis.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We do have one question in the chat from Forba. I wish to know if there are open platforms for enthusiastic ocean lovers like myself. It isn't an easy task to get the necessary tools or skills to amplify our voices as African females in ocean science. That's a great question.
Yes, Forba. I don't know exactly what you mean by an open platform, but there are many platforms out there that are used by so many millions of people, right? It's Twitter, it's Facebook, it's Instagram, it's LinkedIn. I don't know which country in Africa are you from, but there is a really great group of female South Africans who are great MPA, Cameroon. Okay. So, you live not far from Gabon, and Gabon has already protected 28% of their waters, right? So this is, I would encourage you to go online and see and look at how Gabon did it, because it's a great example in West Africa, and it's a tough region, and there is a problem with the industrial fishing fleets from China and the European Union and other places that come and pillage and extract your resources, leaving very little benefits to the Cameroon and the countries of the region. So look at the example of Gabon, how they did it, and then again try to organize your youth community, coastal communities in Cameroon to demand something similar, because since they protected these areas, about 30% of their waters, now their fishermen are catching more fish. So it works for it's a win-win.
It's just so cool to me, Enric, how you can just pull those statistics out of your head about which countries protected how much. And thank you, Forba, for your question.
Well, I know because we were involved in the creation of the areas in Gabon. We did a 1 month expedition all along the coast of Gabon from Congo to all the way to the border of Equatorial Guinea. And we worked very closely with the government and Minister Lee White to identify which areas were the best. So it's not that I have this memory, it's just I know because we've been there.
That makes sense. Yes. And Rifa said LinkedIn is a great platform. There are also many youth networks on there, ocean lovers, activists. That's very true. LinkedIn is an excellent platform. I believe Pristine Seas has its own page on LinkedIn as well. I could probably go and grab the link for that, drop it in the chat in just a moment. But I have one final question for you before we wrap up, and then I will get to some of our announcements at the end. As this is one of a couple of different webinars that you so graciously have joined us for, Enric, one of the most common questions that we have gotten through all of this is they want to know about your personal journey. How do people of, in college and high school, university, how do they get to be into the position that you're in right now? Do they have to have a science major? What kind of experiences should young people be looking out for if they want to really tackle large scale conservation like you are?
Yeah, well, you don't need to be a scientist because, I work with economists. I work with policy experts, with communication experts. And, it's very difficult for one person to command every single field of expertise that you need for successful ocean conservation. You need all of those, right? So, but it takes one person to have an idea and assemble a team. And see, this is what I did. I was a scientist. I was not a film producer. Now I produce films, but it took me years to learn. So, if you are convinced, then you need to identify what do you want to solve? And then what do you need to solve that problem? What are the different expertises that are required? And then who are the best people in your country or elsewhere who can help you with this? And, looking at it from a philosophical life perspective, since that was also part of your question, the Japanese have something called the ikigai, which means, looking at how fulfilling is your life. So imagine a Venn diagram with 3 circles, right? One is your passion, and your passion maybe is writing, right? Maybe it's singing, maybe it's diving or taking photographs. What's your purpose? And in your case here, let's assume that your purpose is to help protect as much of the ocean as possible, right? And then what's your job? What pays for your bills, right? That intersection between the 3 circles is where you want to be, where you are paid to use your passion to fulfill your purpose in life, right? And in my case, I'm very, very fortunate that actually there is almost full overlap between the 3 circles, because I was in academia. My passion was the ocean, and my passion was the ocean, but also conducting research. My purpose became to protect as much of the ocean as possible. And I was able to convince National Geographic to make me an explorer in residence and start the Pristine Seas program, which pays for my salary. So I was able to get that job, to create the job for me that allows me to use my passions, not just one, but several, to fulfill that purpose of protecting 30% of the ocean. So that's how I look at life. And I don't look at difference between work and life. It's all one life, right? So think about how can you spend most of your time doing what you really want to do, trying to make your passion work for your purpose. And if you're a good writer, maybe that that's what you should do. You should not pretend to be what you're not. And I'm not an economist, so this is why I work with economists who know about it, right? So identify the goal, identify the needs, identify the team, and then, don't pretend that you alone are going to solve it. It takes a village, right? So partner with people, build a strong team, and that will make ocean conservation better, and probably your life better too.
Excellent closing words, Enric. Thank you so much. I just dropped in the chat both the link to read a little bit more about Enric's Pristine Seas, and I also dropped a link to Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson. She has kind of created a visual of the Venn diagram that Enric is talking about, and it's very, very helpful. So thank you so much, Enric. It is always a pleasure to have you on our webinars. We really appreciate you being here. So thank you. And if you have to go, I totally understand, but I'm just going to hop into announcements now.
Great. Thank you so much, Laura. And thank you, everyone, and good luck.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a good weekend. Bye. Awesome. Well, that was incredible. Enric is always, always, always inspiring. Really quickly, just for 2 minutes, I'm going to share my screen. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, it serves as a primer to our upcoming youth advocacy training. That is a 4-week virtual advocacy training, all about how to influence conservation action on a local, national, and global level, building off of existing advocacy skills and refining the tools that you'll need to create that positive change. So again, 4 weeks, it's every Saturday starting on April 29th all the way through to May 20th. And any young person from any country can register to join. And if you would like to pre-register, there will be a Zoom survey that will pop up after this webinar is finished, and you can pre-register for the training there. And then I also just wanted to shout out World Ocean Day resources. We very soon will be having our 30 by 30 action guide out on the World Ocean Day website. And then we also have our 2023 event planning and social media toolkits available as well. These will help you plan any conservation event that you might be planning coming up. And that is pretty much it. Again, thank you all so much for joining us. Please let us know if you have any questions, and have a great rest of your weekend.